All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this month's webinar by CDI. Today's Laserfiche Build Along is going to be around public records requests in Laserfiche Forms. My name is Stephen Kreutzfeldt. I'll be your host. I'm a pre-sales engineer here with CDI. If this is your first build along, what is a build along? In a nutshell, a build along is meant to be an interactive experience designed to guide the viewer through the creation and deployment of a common business process. If you have questions throughout, please post those to the floating question or chat box. I'll be taking some time at the end of the webinar to go through and answer as many of those as possible. To get the most out of this, I recommend taking notes and screenshots wherever possible. Don't be afraid to ask any questions that come up. Please complete the survey afterwards, and also note that this will be recorded, and hopefully by early next week we'll have it posted to the CDI YouTube channel. All of the webinars I've done are posted there, so you can always go back and rewatch, pause, rewind, get a lot more out of them that way. All right, so today's process, public records request. The intended audience for this webinar is going to be people in public sector who deal with records requests on a daily basis and who may be doing that in a more paper-based process, or maybe it's not as automated as you would like to see. I'm not saying this is the only way to do records requisition either. I just want to start the ball rolling, start thinking about how we could possibly automate that process. And also experience form users. I'll be using Laserfiche Forms today for a majority of this, and it will help if you have a little bit of experience using Laserfiche Forms. First off, if you're looking to implement this in your city or organization, you will need to have Forms portal that allows the forms that you build in Laserfiche Forms to be made public. And we also recommend you have Forms Professional. Will give you the opportunity to collect payments and do a few other things. All right, today we're going to be using the Laserfiche repository. We're spending most of our time in Laserfiche Forms, and we may delve into the admin console a little bit to look at metadata and things like that. We may also get into workflow. At least I'll show you how you can incorporate workflow into your Laserfiche Forms process. So you may want to have those up and open if you're following along. For the agenda, we're going to start out by going through a demo. I'm going to show you an example of a records request using Laserfiche Forms, workflow, repository, and so on. We'll then go back and start setting up that request, and then we'll go through and build along exactly how we can deploy this. Something you might take a quick screenshot of. This is a very basic record request process, and this is what we're going to be building today. As you see, it's going to start with an online record request requisition using Laserfiche Forms. So this would be something that you could have on your city website where users could go in, fill out the information they want, and submit that. That'll go for an initial approval just to do a cursory glance. Does it contain all the information we need? Can we fulfill this? If so, then it'll create a records requisition folder in Laserfiche along with the task for the retrieval. I'm also going to show you how to add automatic emails in here as well. So that way when they submit their records request, they'll get an email notification when it's being worked on, or if it's rejected, we can automatically send an email to the submitter to say, we're going to need a little more information if we're going to fulfill this records request. So that will be assigned as a task for record retrieval and delivery. And then I also have a workflow in here that, again, we may or may not get to this today. Basically what that does is marks the folder as, yes, this is complete. The records have been delivered. We have confirmation of that, and so put it into the process for it becomes a record in and of itself. So that's more or less what we're going to be doing today. All right, so let's get into it. Quick little PSA. I'm going to be using the Laserfiche Cloud today. So this may look a little bit different from the forms that you're using if you have either hosted or on-premise solution, but know that all of the functionality is going to be the same. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the play button and get started with this. So I need you to imagine that this is something that is hosted on your website, that someone clicks a hyperlink or a button and it navigates out and takes them to this. So I'm just going to give some basic information. My phone number, email, we'll give a mailing address. We'll just have that auto-populate. How do you want to receive your records? Do you want them FedExed, in-person pickup, secure email? Let's go with secure email. We'll show that. I also have a records category. This is actually pulling from an external table, but this could just be a regular drop-down list. I will say city administration, request personnel information. Maybe I need the clerk in hiring information for John Doe from whatever, 1/9/2019 or something. Just a detailed request, so that way whoever's looking at this, reviewing it, knows exactly what they need and can go out and find that. So we'll go ahead and submit that. Now, most of the time in forms, when something is submitted, it usually gets routed to somebody as a task to let them know that this has been assigned to you. We can include an automatic email to notify the person the task is assigned to that yes, this has been assigned to you. We also are sending an email to the person that submitted it. So you'll see that it's auto-populating with my name, saying that we are currently reviewing the submission. And if you have any questions, call this number. I'll show you how we can create these. So it should be going for clerk approval here shortly. Give it just a second. One thing you'll notice is I'm actually sending it to the initiator. This is a good way to demo or to test your processes. Simply make it that whoever submits the form, they actually get that routed to them. And I'm wondering if that's my issue. It looks like it didn't save that. Joys of doing this live. I'm actually going to try this again quick. We'll just auto-populate some basic information. And try that again. If you're ever wondering if your form is running correctly, you can go to the monitor and you'll be able to actually go in and see, run a search either on a specific process. In this case, I'm interested in my records request process. And we'll be able to see that these are in fact suspending, it looks like. And you'll be able to go in and see why that is. It looks like it's having trouble assigning the task. So if that does happen, a good way, I mean, that's helpful because then you know exactly where your error is occurring. So this is actually a good lesson in troubleshooting. Oops. And I'm just going to add a couple of other users here. Not sure why this is running incorrectly right now. Now we'll try this again. All right, so that's what I expected to see, was a notification that approval is routed to me. Normally this will show up in your forms inbox, so you'll be able to log in, go to your inbox, or you can, if you get the email notification that it's been assigned to you, you can click on that and it'll take you directly out to the form for approval. In this case, I'm going to give it a request number. This can also be automated too, that we have done workflows in the past that will automatically assign things like request numbers based on a specific type of format. In this case, I usually do just the date. So like 7821 dash, we'll say 3. Oh my gosh. 7821 dash 3. We can see all the information is now read only. Normally, I would probably reject this because we don't have very strong details, but we're going to assume that we have what we need. And so then we can also select a department that we can assign this to reroute. So I'm going to go ahead and say approve. Once that initial approval has been completed, if it had been rejected, it would send an email to let them know. In this case, it's been approved, so we're going to send it to and create that folder in Laserfiche. So if we pop over to the repository, we can take a look at what it's doing over here. So in the business process library, I have my record requests that are pending. And we should see one there, 7821 3. So there's our folder. There's a sample of our request. And what this is just it can be either a PDF or a TIFF rendering of the form that was just submitted and all of the information. You can assign metadata to this if you want. I don't typically do that. I think I do have some on the folder itself, though. If we look at the metadata over here, we can see who the requester was, the status of that requisition, the email, and also the request number. Much of that's going to be important when we run a workflow later to identify which folder we need to change the status to, where to move it, and things like that. But this is going to serve as the folder for gathering all of the records when we are ready for that step. So if I go back to my, because I'm in the cloud, I have a dashboard. I should be able to see any active tasks. And I'm actually not seeing my tasks. So let's go ahead and go back to my forms process quick and figure out why that may be. Let's actually go to our monitor. Business process, records requests. Okay, so it did suspend again, and it does look like it had trouble routing to, it looks like it was trying to route to an anonymous user. So that's one of the downsides, it looks like, of having this done by someone from the public. But what we can do, just kind of finish this out, if this was assigned to me properly, from the repository, I can take the information that I had assigned to me, and I have little tasks that say you need to go out and find these documents and make sure that you deliver it to them. If it's going to be in-person pickup, we have all the information in the form to notify them that they are ready for pickup. If it's going to be through USPS or UPS, FedEx, etc., we can have that shipping task be what we do next. But in this case, let's just go ahead and say that we need personnel files, so we'll go into active employees. And we'll just grab this. And what I'm going to do is actually move or copy this over to my other folder. So repository, business process library. And these can go anywhere you like. This is just, again, a sample. Pending. And we actually want to copy it here. So once that's copied, we can go ahead and go back into our folder. Maybe that's all they wanted was just that one document. If they want multiple files, that's also a possibility, and that'd be totally fine. Going into public records, pending, our folder, these are ready to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a secure file share. It's actually a Laserfiche add-on, or it comes out of the box with Cloud. You can also email these. That I think just from day one, Microsoft 365 and Outlook integration is pretty standard, so you'd be able to email those directly to somebody. I'm going to use the direct share though instead, and send it to myself. Your records. Here you go. One thing that's nice about the direct share is you do have the ability to set a password just to make it add that extra level of security. You can also send as pages or as a PDF, depending on how you want to do that. And we'll go ahead and hit send. So once that's sent, we should get an email that shows that Stephen Creutzfeldt Sees Digital sent you files. And if we download these pictures, you'll be able to see that it's a Get Your Files button. So when you click on that, what it does is actually gives you the ability to download those locally. So this is what the end user is going to see. So I can open those up in a file folder. And there you go. You can see the files that I shared. Similarly, on the other end, we can see that the files were sent successfully. We can see that the content has an expiration date because it is basically granting access to these files. We want to make sure that we cut that off and don't just give them full access or anything like that. And then once they download it, there'll be another email that I know takes just a little bit longer to come in. I can show you that when that comes in, but it's letting the sender know in real time that these files have been delivered and they've been downloaded, so we can then show that yes, they have in fact been received as we expected them to be. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about how to build this now. A couple things you'll need to think about. I always like to whiteboard my forms processes before I start building them. And I think about all the things I'm going to need. I'm going to need a folder structure. Where am I going to be housing those records requests, and how are those folders going to be created? Do I want to have a template assigned to those? Probably yes. In order to create your templates, you would go into the Laserfiche admin console. And we'll need to go to metadata. Again, yours will probably look a little bit different, and create those templates. In my case, I just called it record request. And my template has 4 basic fields on it. That's going to be the requester name, the requisition status, which I believe is either complete, pending, or rejected. So that's a drop down. The requester email, which is really handy, especially if you're going to be emailing those records or sending them through that direct file share that I showed you. You'd be able to very easily copy and paste or pull that from the metadata right from the folder, rather than trying to juggle back and forth and manually type. Anytime you can avoid typing something by hand manually, you're going to reduce the possibility of error or fat fingering something. So requester email is a good one to have, and also record request number, a unique identifier to show which request this is, and also so that way the requester has a number that they can give whoever if they have questions. So step 1, get your template ready to go. Step 2, identify where at in the repository you want these to go. This is all what I refer to as infrastructure. In my case, business process library is kind of where I keep just my demo folders, my different processes. So that's why that's here, but it could be pretty much anywhere. I just label it record requests. The reason why you want to have this set up beforehand is as we are building out our forms process, we're going to want to be able to point it to a save location. And then the last step is going to be to actually start building out the form itself. You will need to have design rights or kind of administrative rights in Laserfiche Forms in order to build these. So if you are getting in there and you don't see a design tab or something like that, chances are you don't have that access. And so I would talk to IT or someone else to figure out how to get that. By the way, this is what the email looks like once Those have been downloaded. You can see all that information is coming in automatically. All right, so I'm going to create a new business process. When you create it, it'll give you an option here of blank, form submission, form approval. You can also upload, so you have the ability to export and import forms processes. So if you have a friend or neighbor who's got some great Laserfiche forms, go ahead and have them share that with you. And then there's also the business process library, if you're not familiar. This comes standard with all Laserfiche forms installations. I don't remember exactly how many there are. I want to say there's like 60 or 70 different forms that are already pre-built that'll kind of give you that initial setup. Now, of course, you'll have to tailor them to fit your organization, and you'll have to go in and update things like the routing steps, who they're getting routed to, what metadata you're adding, and things like that. But it gives you a head start for sure. And it's broken off into categories, into industries, etc. I'm kind of curious if records request is actually one of them on here. Doesn't look like it. Business license application is, though. Contract approval, things like that. So I encourage you to go in here and poke around, download a couple of these, see if any of them could work for you. But most of the time I start with form submission because it gives me my starting form, it gives me my end. I'm going to go ahead and fill out the rest of that myself. So we're going to create demo records as our forms process. Now, I've heard people say that it doesn't matter if you create the process first, if you have that mapped out, or the form. I'm going to go out and definitively state that you should create the form first, because what happens in the form should be driving what happens in the business process. So if you need to have multiple versions of the form, when I went through and did my initial demo, you saw that the first submitted form had a lot of fields to fill out. The second form had additional fields and a lot of read only. And what you would have seen had it worked correctly on the last one is something that contained just partial information of what was submitted and looked entirely different. So you want to have a different form, actual form like with the fields for each step of the process, depending on who needs to see what. So I'll show you how to do that as well. First thing I also like to do, and this is just personal preference, I go up to the settings here. I like to rename my starting form. Sometimes I even add a number to say like records request and show that it's step 1 in the process. That way, when I'm looking at multiples, I can keep track of where I'm at. I also like to align from the top. So what that means is when you're looking at the field labels above it instead of side by side. It just seems like it looks a little bit nicer. And then the form title is different from the name of the form. This is what people actually see when they log in, whereas the form title itself or the form name itself is what you would see on the back end and how you would refer to this form. Now is the easy part / the fun part. All we need to do is start dragging and dropping, and I'm just going to pull up my little snapshot here that I've got. Anytime you want to have just like a open source, type whatever you feel like type of field, that's going to be a single line, not to be confused with multi-line. Multi-line is basically how many single lines do you want. So if you're expecting someone's going in and write a paragraph, you'd use a multi-line field and set it to either 2 or 4 or 6, depending on how big you want that to be. But the first thing I'm going to put in here is just name. So that's going to be the field label. The field size is going to be medium. You can limit the number of characters. You can make it required, which I think this could be important, so that'll be good. Variable is something, it's very important to be aware of it. The variable is how Laserfiche refers to this field. If you don't put anything in this, it'll automatically populate when we save and refresh. But if you have multiple name fields or multiple email fields and they all have the same label, the way you differentiate between those is the variable. So you'll see here it just put in name underscore. If you have your own idea of how you want to differentiate between your fields, you can actually customize that variable up until the point where you save. Once you save it, it's locked in there. I can't do anything with it anymore. All right, so we want the name. We also want a phone number. It might seem like you want to include or make the phone number a number field. That's not actually the case though, because you want to be able to include things like dashes and parentheses, things like that, and spaces. So I use a single line for phone. And there are ways to customize and use CSS to format the phone. So something that I always like to do with my phone field is I just have some basic CSS that I have ready to go in a just a OneNote. So if you were to go into CSS and JavaScript, and just give me 1 second to pull this up. Go ahead and save that. And then on the form itself, we would need to open up the phone number and identify its CSS class, so we know what the JavaScript is referring to. So we're going to say that give this phone because that's what the JavaScript is telling it to format, and save. And then if I'm lucky, this will work. So now what we've done is we formatted the phone so we can start typing. It'll automatically add the parentheses, the dash, and so on and so forth. And I'd be more than happy to share that code with you guys. I'm not a programmer. I like to say that I can read JavaScript and I can read CSS, but I can't write it. But I do know how it kind of works, and so I've got my little snippets that I just copy and paste in. Whenever I want a new one, I go out and I find a programmer, buy some ice cream or something, bribe them to help me out. All right, so let me just go back to my. All right, so next we want email. Email is going to be important, especially if we're going to be sharing the documents via email. So we'll want to make that required. Maybe we'll even put that toward the top. There is an email field. What's nice about that is that it is automatically set up to only accept properly formatted emails. So you don't have to use any crazy CSS or JavaScript or anything like that here. If we were to go in and try to type in something here and then hit tab, it'll say, nope, that's not an email address. It has to include the @ sign. Oh my gosh. There you go. So now it's happy because it has that @ it has that dot, and so it recognizes that. And so that's ready to go right away. Similarly, address is really nice. If you just want to drop in the address, it'll automatically bring in street address 1, 2, city, state, zip. It's already formatted side by side, so that's nice as well. And then I like to add something like a drop down, a list of how do you want to receive your records. And when you're formatting this, you just put in your choices and then hit enter after each one. Something like that. You can make it required. You can give it a default value too. So that's automatically populated. So if you want email to be the default, you can. And then, so for the record categories that you saw me using, what that was, it was basically doing a lookup to an external table. Setting up external tables is something that I do in another webinar, so I'd recommend looking at that. But for today's demo, we're just going to go ahead and put in. Actually, you know what? I'll just change my mind about this. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to make that a drop down. like record category. Maybe police, city, personnel, etc., what have you. So then they can select that. And then probably most important, and this is where I like to use a multi-line. Please provide a detailed description of the records you're requesting. Something we haven't looked at yet also is you have the ability to add tooltips. And so those are the little question marks that if you hover over them, they can give you some additional information about what it is we're looking for here. So I like to say things like, please include name, social security number, date of birth, document numbers, dates, etc. And so if you put that in there and hit save, and then go into and take a look at this, you'll see we've got this little question mark. And if we hover over that, it'll say, please include all of these things. So it's kind of handy. I think it's a neat little trick anyway. And so that's basically it for the first records submission. If you want to give it a theme, i.e. make it a little bit cleaner, nicer looking than just the black and white, there's custom themes in here. Otherwise, you can kind of go in here and customize them and add your logo or change your background wallpaper. You've got some flexibility when it comes to making it your own, giving it that same theme so that way it's aligned with your city colors or etc. All right, so thinking about how this is going to work though, remember that we submitted the document and that needs to go for approval, but the approval is going to need to have different fields than just this. So the way we do that is we're actually going to use this copy button to copy over the form. That way we have everything we had originally, but then we also have the ability to now create other fields. And I'm also going to add a 2 to that, say done. One thing that wasn't totally clear to me the first time that I started working with forms is how do I pass over information from one form to another? And the key to that is actually your variables. Now, when I copied this, it brought over all of the same fields, obviously, along with all the same variables. But if you wanted to kind of pick and choose which ones you wanted, and you wanted to maybe start over and say, I only want the name and the email and nothing else, you wouldn't create a new name field or a new email field. You would select your variables and then drag and drop from that. So these are ones that are already being used. So if these fields exist downstream from the initial submission, you can copy them over by using these variables. So we do need to think of this initial review as being a new form. So we can treat it as such. So the name is no longer going to necessarily be required. In fact, we might want to make it read-only on this form. Similar to the email, we can make this one read-only, not necessarily required, and down on the line. But we also want to include something like a requisition number, right? So back to our fields, and this would be required for this step. So we could say requisition number. And we could limit it to a certain number of characters. We give it a default value. We could also give it some text below. So like example. So then if we look at our, oops, need to save first. By the way, I don't know if you guys caught this. The way that I'm sampling this and like reviewing it is this little eyeball. So then we can see that, see how it looks. See these fields are now read only, and so on. All right, another thing that I did include in mine was a drop-down for department to route to. Let's give it 2 examples. And what's nice about this is based on your selections, you can have your business process become more dynamic and dynamically route based on selections made. Now, in my example, I was just routing it back to myself over and over again for demo purposes. But if you want to send this out to different individuals for approvals, you have a lot of flexibility when it comes to that piece. So then the last form, I'm actually going to create from scratch. So I'm going to create a new form, call it Record Retrieval. I'm going to use Classic. So we're going to update our title. And then we can start picking and choosing what we want to include. Now for the record retrieval, we just need to kind of know the requisition number, and that's going to be read only. We would need to know the, actually, you know what, probably wouldn't even necessarily need to know the email, so we could delete that. We would need to know how they want to receive them maybe. Detailed description. Actually, let's go ahead and do it. Let's go ahead and bring over everything, but rather, if we want to have maybe a separate page or a separate section specifically for all of the individual's information, we can do that by adding a section. Request information, right? And then what I like to do sometimes is use like a little hide show. And so maybe I'll have a checkbox here. We'll call it show requester information. And then what we can do is save that, and under request information, we'll add the name of the submitter as read only. Oops, not required, read only. And their address as read only, and their email is read only, and their phone number. And maybe we want the record category up here. So then we have something called field rules. Not to be confused with lookup rules. Lookup rules are how we set up our external table lookups. Field rules are things like hide, show, etc. So if we say show requester information when show requester information yes is checked, and then save. Oops. So what that'll do then, notice when you create a new form, it doesn't carry over your theme automatically, so you need to add that anyway. So you say show requester information yes, it'll pop all that open. So that way your form is a little bit less cluttered. You're only looking at what's relevant to you. And then also something that I did on the form that you guys didn't see was basically just added a series of checkboxes. If you want to add text, by the way, there's 2 different options. You can use the HTML, but a new feature that I think works really well is the rich text. First thing I always do is take out the field. Give it a variable if you want to, have something to show what it is, but the field label just seems to look a little bit wonky on these. I often make these read only. We could be like, please follow these instructions. Retrieve records, blah, blah. What's nice about this is you can, do everything like underline, you can bold, You can format it, indent, you can embed links, photos, pictures, things like that. So it's kind of nice. So we'll do that. We'll change our theme. And we will save. So now we basically have our 3 steps. Once we have all of our forms set up the way we want, now we can go in and start the business processes. You'll need to delete this little line, and a form will not run correctly unless it has a start and an end and everything's connected beginning to end. Otherwise, it'll throw errors out. If you're ever curious if something is correct or not, you can hit this little checkbox to validate it. And it'll tell you, nope, Stephen, not even close. None of this doesn't do anything. And you go, oh, okay. And it'll give you little red boxes to show you where you need help. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to double click and configure our starting event, our start rule, which would be a records request. So give it a detailed name. You can choose which of your forms you want to be the beginning. I would actually probably just go just that for now. Upon event completion, you can either redirect them to your city website, or you can just have a generic thank you, your form has been submitted successfully option. And then you'll notice this has all the rich text, so you can add things like hyperlinks and pictures and everything else, depending on how you want to do this. So once that's submitted, then it's going to go to a user. Actually, you know what? Just kidding. First, we're going to go ahead and send out an email task. So even though it may be a little bit redundant because they did see that, yes, this has been submitted successfully, we may still want to send out an email notice to just validate that, yes, we've received it. Yes, it's being processed. So what I like to do is just send an email notice to let them know it's working. The subject can be your record request under review. If you want to attach the form that they submitted, you can do that, or you can attach something else. You can have the body say whatever you want. Oh my gosh. Hello, and you can start using some of the information from the form that was submitted too. So if we want to say hello and then use their name, we can use this little token picker to select their name. The most important is going to be subject, and then who are we going to send it to. Also using the token picker, that's why we made the email a required field. It may not be totally clear, but I believe the email is selecting the variable name, not the actual field name. So that's why it's also important to know where your variables can be found and how to identify which one of these you want to use. And then click on it, you'll see a little arrow come out. We want to just connect that and say, upon submission, go to this. Workflow, forms, everything reads like a book, top to bottom, left to right. So starting this way and going to the right. So next, it can go to a user, and the user task is, so when you want to assign the task to somebody to do a manual step, that's this user task. And you can double click on it, or you can highlight it and then open up the details pane from the right. Give it a name, like initial approval, and that can either be sent to a team based on a variable, in which case you need to tell it which variables, or a user. In my case, that could be a role, so like user initiator or submitter, or it can just be my actual name. And this is pulling from LFDS, so it's pulling from your actual users in the system. So you'll be able to start typing and be able to select who it can be routed to. So first, assign it to whomever needs to see it. Step 2, which form are they going to get? So you'll need to select, in this case, the records request is what I want them to be able to see. And sure, they can go ahead and save a draft. I don't want them to be able to just hit submit though. I want them to have 2 different buttons, one for approve and one for reject, and then publish and save. I just like to save and publish as I go. I'm nervous about losing things. So now we have a choice though, because if they can either approve or reject. We want to have a couple of different options. So that's when I would use an exclusive gateway. Exclusive gateway means it only goes down one path. Inclusive gateway means it can go down multiple. So if you say, tentative approve or whatever, then it can go down like an approval, but maybe also send out an email over here to say, hey, we may need some extra information. Parallel means go down all branches. So if you need 6 different people to approve something, you would use a parallel gateway. If you need 5 out of those possible 6 to approve, you would use an inclusive gateway. If you only need 1 person to approve it, exclusive. I hope that's not confusing. If so, I'm sorry. So we're going here, and this is like an intersection. And let's say that if they reject it, it's going to send an email. And if they approve it, then we want to save it to Laserfiche. Save to Laserfiche is the save to repository service task. It looks like 3, kind of fields. And the way we configure this now, oh, by the way, if you go down one path and you want it to end, you will have to add an end event as well. So make sure it should look like this. If you click on the branch, then you can give it a name. And then in the condition, we click on this and say if the last user action equals reject, and then insert that, that'll write it automatically for you. And that's how we configure it to go down that path. Similarly, we'll have to do something here as well. We can name it approve and say that if the last user action equals approve, insert, go down this path. And so that's how it's going to make the choice based on this decision. It's going to look at what that decision was and either save it to the repository or go here. On the save to repository task, we're going to call this save to Laserfiche or save to LF. You'll need to establish that connection if you haven't done so in the past. So that would be like you're either using admin or workflow or some sort of service account to establish that connection that can actually save to the repository without getting booted. You'll select the step you want to save from. You can name the document. Oftentimes I call it, whatever it is, and then we can use information from this as well. So if it's records request and we have a requisition number, we can actually call it that. Might be redundant though, because I'd actually like this to save into a records request folder. So maybe what we want is a category instead. So you can then tell it which folder to go into, or at least starting. So in my case, I use the business process library records request, and it's definitely going to be pending. And then the additional path, in my case, is going to be the actual folder, which is my requisition number to differentiate. Down here, you can configure fields, and you can either configure the fields on the document, that's what it means by fields, or the parent folder fields, meaning the folder that it goes into. Right from this activity, you can assign a template and metadata to the folder that it's going into, which is what I would actually want to do here, is go into records request. It'll bring up my template. I'm going to say the requester name is going to be the name from my form. The status is actually going to be pending at this point. Requester email is going to be my email, and the number is going to be the requisition number, and done. So once it's saved, we know we've approved it, so then you could add maybe another email service task and configure that as we did before to let them know that it's been approved. And then from there, we need to add a final task to one of our users to say, go get the records and deliver them to them. And once you're done, you can have the end. So once again, just a reminder, we would say who we want it to go to. So in this case, it'd be just initiator. Oh my gosh, if I can spell. Or it can be a specific individual, like Stephen, or it could be a role. We need to show which form they will see. In this case, it would be records retrieval. And you can actually rename your buttons as well. They don't have to be submit, approve, and reject. I can say complete or something like that, and that'll be the button that they see. Save and publish. If we're curious if this is going to work or not, we can say validate. In this case, it's not, and that's because I didn't add my email recipients. And because of time, I'm just going to go ahead and actually remove these. But you see how nice that is, that you can just hit that checkbox and it'll tell you exactly where all your errors are. Super handy. Try publishing again. Looks like it's good to go. So then if we want to go through that process very quickly, we can give it a name, submit, say thank you. We get initial approval assigned to you. I did get an email as well. We'll give it a requisition number. Requisition number is 1. Say route to department and approve. It'll save to Laserfiche. And then the last user task assigned to me. We can see the information coming in, example, all of that coming in just fine. So the last thing you'll need to be aware of is I mentioned that you'll need a Forms portal in order to actually make this public. In your Forms settings, under security, this will look a little bit different if you have this on premise, but we need to be able to flip that to public, and that public option won't actually be available unless you do have Forms portal. You can also customize your link as well, so it'll show you how to actually navigate to public and open source forms, but then you can also append this specific form to it. So demo record and apply. So then if I was to actually go to, maybe I should have written that down. Let's take a look at that quick. We can hit share, copy. If we open this up and paste, hit enter, it'll take us directly to that records request, and that can be hit from anywhere. You guys could type in that from your PC right now, and it should take you to this records request. Last thing, just make sure that it's published. You may also want to check the security to make sure you know who's going to have access to this and who isn't, because it may be locked down by default, so you'll need to look at that as well. But in a nutshell, I mean, the best we can do in 45 minutes, that is how you can create a simple records request form. As I mentioned, this was recorded, so you'll be able to access it from the CDI YouTube channel probably early next week. Some other great resources out there if you want to learn more about Laserfiche would be Laserfiche Answers. Typically, if you Google any Laserfiche question at all, one of the top results is a post from Laserfiche Answers. There's a great user community out there. Solution Exchange is another one. And then also anytime you want to visit laserfiche.com/support, a lot of great information there as well. If you want to contact us or want to see how you can deploy what we looked at today in your own organization, maybe with a little bit of help, you can email us at consulting@citiesdigital.com. If you have questions about getting things like Forms Portal or Forms Professional or the direct file share, you can email sales@citiesdigital.com and then get you a quote. And if you have any issues, maybe you're setting this up and it's not routing directly to your initiator and you have things that are behaving incorrectly, go ahead and send that information to support@citiesdigital.com and we'll get a technician on board to help you out. With that, I've got a few minutes to answer any questions you guys might have. Yes, please share the formatting for the code for the number. Yes, I will do that. All right, so when you add the address field, can you later use just one component of the address in the workflow? Example, I want request filed in the repository by zip code. Can I do that? Yes. So if you're using like workflow, or if you're using like passing that information over to metadata, it will allow you to select each one of those components. It basically adds 5 or 6 fields all at once. Caveat though, I don't think it was always that way. So depending on which version of Forms you have, it may not do that. That I did come across a client where I was having trouble parsing it apart. So I did recommend that they create each one of those separate address field, and then a separate city, a separate state, separate zip. But when I was working on this, building this this week, I was able to pull out just the zip, just the address, etc. What is the difference between the two save settings? I think I need to look quick and see what you're referring to. Can you elaborate on that? Save settings activity. Are you talking about the save to Laserfiche? Oh, save the submitted form from this I see. Yes. So, you can either save a specific form with all of the current data, or you can basically save from a specific process step. So if you only want to save the initial submission, even though we've gathered additional information like a route to and a form and things like that, you can go back retroactively, save only the submission without all the other information. So that's what that's referring to. Saves the submitted form from a specific process step, and it'll show you your different processes and your different steps. Or you can just save current process data. 99% of the time, you're going to want to save the most recent form with the most recent data. At least that's been my experience. Yeah, you bet. Forms is fun. The drag and drop stuff's really easy. Designing the forms is cool. I like how intuitive it is to put your own theme and things like that on it. But there are a lot of little gotchas, and there's a lot of additional information. It's one of those things that like you can really tunnel down that rabbit hole. If you are proficient with JavaScript, CSS, HTML, the world is your oyster in here. You can really pretty much design whatever you want. I've seen some crazy forms that I didn't even realize were Laserfiche forms, and wouldn't know that if I hadn't been able to like just look at the URL or the link. So I hope this gives you a little bit of information on how to get things started. Once again, use those CDI emails. Feel free to reach out to us. We're always here to help. We're always eager to take on more projects and see what where your imagination can take you. So with that, thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time.